of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, guys, you know this is one of my favorite spaces that I enjoy greatly. And that is welcoming our guests because I know that they're coming with a couple of things that I deem very expensive. That is their commodity of time. Carolyn is here to come and share some of that precious commodity with us so that we can get a chance to understand who she is. And we know the value of it. I tell people if you don't understand the value, if you haven't learned how to respect her, in love with her, all of those things, she will reward you, but you have to be able to understand who she is and what she is. The other is the journey. Man, the journey is a powerful creator. It has created Carolyn, and so we are honored that she's here to spend both of these precious commodity with us. And we are eager, willing to learn so that we can become better human spirits while we're here on this planet. Carolyn, and welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
It is an honor. I usually ask every one of my guests this question. It's a loaded question. This is how we enter into the conversation. And that question, I ask it because I want the audience to get familiar with it because they need to ask it for themselves as well. How do you serve mankind?
I think serving mankind really, goes into relationships. As we were talking about a little bit before, life is really all about relationships. And I think that by serving one another and by being kind to one another, we are making a difference. And I do think that, serving can be different based on, religion. Like for me, it would be serving at church. That's one thing I could do. Or just like volunteering, whatever it is. I love to help people.
I love that. I think that's what we are all called to do, to help others.
Yes.
And when we are present in that moment doing that, we receive a couple of things I tell people that you'll never experience unless you do that. Joy. People get happy, but when you start stepping out and helping others, there's a thing called joy that is much deeper, and it comes from a place that is called in the world out there. They said the subconscious mind. In religion, it is called the soul of that individual. One of the customs here at Threads of Enlightenment, Caroline, is we go back into our time machine that is accessible through the memory. And we revisit some of those spaces that we grow up and we visit for a short period of time. That first space is, they call it the home. We have a couple of strangers called mom and dad. Sometimes I call them scientists that is about to practice some thesis that they have based on their trauma. And they're now going to deposit information in you and your siblings. What was your family like?
My family is they are the most incredible people. I mean, I can't say enough about how I had just a great upbringing with my family. My sister and I, we're best friends now. I mean, when we were growing up, we definitely fought about who's wearing whose nail polish and all that sort of stuff. But my mom and dad are just the most selfless people I've ever met. And I think that's kind of that's kind of turned me into who I am as well.
How did that, having that type of parents and guidance from them, as a young individual being in that type of energy, that type of mindset, how was Carolyn? I mean, how was she? What type of child, if you will, what type of
Yeah.
individual was she within that mix?
So, what's crazy is I had all the love and the support at home. And, my parents, my sister, biggest fans, of course. But every time I left the house and when I went to school as a kid, I found out from a young age that I had anxiety. And so I struggled kind of with situations with making friends and also kind of just in school. I struggled in school as well. And as a kid, I was just a very anxious kid. I worried constantly. I always, it was like I always worried about the worst possible thing that could happen. And It was anxious. That anxiety was like my main thing for sure.
Was there a situation, Carolyn, that created that genesis that you can remember, or it was just a part of your being, of your makeup, if you will?
Yes. So actually, it was specifically, I got bullied in third grade and I got a death threat in third grade. And after
Wow.
that is kind of
What
when my
school did you
anxiety.
go to for you to get a death threat
Well,
at
all
the
they did
third
was take
grade?
away their recess, so they didn't really handle it the best way. But no, I struggled with, third grade and making friends, and then after I got my death threat, that's kind of when my anxiety really started to
Yeah,
develop. Now, I didn't know it was anxiety at the time, but that was
yeah.
kind of what kind of transpired.
Yeah, we again. The reason why I ask these questions, Carolyn, because there's always a genesis, if you will, of the trauma and the incident that gives birth to us, if you will, meaning that it creates a mindset, it creates a perception, how we are going to now deal with others, how we're going to deal with ourselves, how we respond to that type of thing. That's why I had asked that question to kind of like isolate where that incident took place. So here's this young girl, traumatized at a young age, death threats in school. I'm telling you, I went to school in New York. Nothing like that happened to me when I was there. So I don't know where you were, girl. So,
Pittsburgh, PA.
close by, close by. So here you are moving through, familiar with trauma, familiar with anxiety, which is a powerful force that one, when they're familiar with it, can overtake them. As she is now moving forward in her life, getting a little older, um, how did she begin to manage herself with those type of force energy that is surrounding her and her mind and her belief system as she's moving through anxiety and stuff like that?
She really didn't. I it was like hard because, when you look back now, I can say like, oh, that was anxiety or that was because of that certain situation. But I
Yeah.
truly didn't know how to kind of like, I guess almost cope in a way of like talking about my thoughts and talking about my feelings and talking about things that were going on. So I did kind of struggle with a young age of kind of like, how do I kind of deal with this? Because what would end up happening is I would internalize situations a lot,
Yes.
which would only make the depression and the anxiety worse, which is kind of what happened.
Yeah. When those things happen to us at that age, Carolyn, we lack the skill set to label them, to identify exactly what they are. And because we uh, are not afforded the skill set at that time, the understanding of what they are, we don't know how to address them. It's much later in our life when, whatever, through counseling or whatever, we recognize that, wait a minute, this is anxiety, this is depression. Then we can formulate a plan, if you will. We could bring tools into our life to assist us. But when we're young, we have no idea. We're just trying to make it from day one to day two, and figure out how to get there. So she's going through life, and we can see some of the things that is being developed in her life as this individual internalizing all of the data that she's getting in her life as she's moving forward through high school. We know high school can be such a beautiful place. Um, how did she manage herself in there with kids that at that time very cruel? They don't have filters. They really don't care about anything else. How did she manage her being there in that setting?
16-year-old Carolyn was very insecure. She didn't know who she was. She pretty much would go to school and just pray that she could make it through the next day. She went to a public high school for her first year and a half. And it was really hard because everyone had their groups, everyone had their friends.
Yeah.
And going into it and not really knowing where to fit in, not really knowing where you belong, it's a very tough situation. And then on top of that, to find out my sophomore year of high school that I actually have a learning disability called nonverbal learning disability. It
Hmm.
kind of started to make sense because with nonverbal, you're highly verbal, but you do struggle with conceptual skills. You struggle with internalizing and overthinking and like all that stuff. So it all kind of started to make sense. But it definitely
Hmm.
was something that I didn't really know how to cope with until I was older because it just kept building and it just kept getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't talk about it, you know?
Yeah. Again, we're the journey or life, if you will, is a collection of data and decisions based on the data. And so as you're getting the data, you're beginning to identify certain things within your life. And this
Right.
disability, you were able to give it a name. But still, as I said before, we don't have the tools or the skill set yet to
No.
begin to address it. And so we're just moving through. And I tell people most of our lives until we get into our 20s and 30s and stuff like that, we are just surviving, if you will, you know, from day to day, just basically surviving. And then we have an incident that kind of arrests us to have a conversation about that surviving skill that we've been using. So here she is. She's beginning to go on her own, if you will, as they say, and blaze her path. And this young girl now is looking, this young woman is looking towards college. What was the conversation in your mind and your family? Because, you know, family always have an input in that, as to where you're going. And Carolyn, why did you pick where you went?
Yeah, that's so it's kind of crazy because whenever I was applying to colleges, I still remember by this point I was in boarding school. From sophomore year to senior year, I was in boarding school
Mhm.
in Connecticut. And I was applying to colleges and my parents would say, "You sure you don't want to apply anywhere in Pittsburgh?" I was like, "Nah, like absolutely not. I'm not going to be home. No." And I actually picked where I went at first because I thought that this version of college in my head was going to be different than
Mhm.
what it was. And I don't regret picking that school because I mean, I ultimately ended up transferring back home, which was ultimately what was best for me. But the crazy thing is that while I was at my first school before I transferred, I struggled so bad with depression, anxiety, self-harm. Like I was not doing well. And my
Right.
mom said to me, "Please join one club while you're there." So I joined the writing
Yeah.
club. And when I joined the writing club, I met one of my like best friends to this day actually, and she published a book. And she always told me, "You have an amazing story, you should share it." And I was like, "No." Not no. We're not doing that. Um and it wasn't until, later on that I realized that she was right. My story did have a purpose and it did have a voice that needed to be heard. And I was lucky to have her because she inspired me to, you know, use my voice after a life-threatening
Yeah.
car accident. So that was crazy.
So what was happening, Carolyn, for this young woman to start to spiral out of control in that fashion, where
Yeah.
you had these thoughts? What was happening in her life for her to have those drastic thoughts in a way?
I definitely really struggled with my self-worth and I struggled with confidence. I struggled with fitting in. I struggled with being myself because I always felt that if I was myself, people would be like, "Oh, you're dumb," or like, "You're stupid," or like, "Why would you say that?" Like, I always worried that I could never just unapologetically be me. And I really struggled that with that in college at the beginning because, when you go to college, there's the summer before, and there's those summer group chats or whatever. And you think at one point that
Yeah.
you're going to be friends with the people in the chat, and then you go to school and it's not like that at all. And it throws you off. It does throw you off. And I
Yeah.
just really struggled with not having friends and not having friends and not having, not having a boyfriend, not having just like, I just really didn't feel wanted and I really didn't feel needed. I really kind of thought college was going to be my best 4 years of my life. And when it wasn't, I quickly started to spiral.
Yeah. Expectation is can be one of the most, it's good and bad. It's a double-edged sword because I think
Yeah.
you use expectations to bring, and we use expectation through visualization to make things, manifest and so forth. But we can also use it to destroy ourselves as well. So I tell people be very mindful that most of these tools have a double-sided, so that can both heal and both damage. So here's this girl going through some dark times, if you will. Mom gave you a suggestion, which I think nothing happens just by happenstance, and you just happen to pick the writing club. I love how we always just happen, you know. It's inside of you. It's a part of you, but we don't know the purpose of it yet. And so we always say,
Yeah.
I just happened. So, okay, let's go with since you just happened. You just happened to pick this writing. When you were there in that particular club and you were beginning to see the value of expression through the written word, what how did you manage yourself there? Did you like it? How were you dealing with that club, if you will?
I think that club was very good for me because it kind of forced me to write out of my comfort zone. We would be writing stuff as a like group and really kind of figure out what type of topics we wanted to talk about, stuff like that. To be honest, though, I didn't fully give it my all because I was not in a good place. And I
Yeah.
I really kind of I really struggled with even going to meetings, to be honest with you. I really wanted to have something that I could have that would take my mind off of the depression, the anxiety, and as much as the writing club was good, I also think that it was like I had to force myself to go.
And at this time, Carolyn, in your life, did you introduce any type of counselors or anything like that at this time, or you were just surviving on your own, moving through
Yeah.
life?
So I actually started therapy when I was like 15, 16.
Hmm.
And I had a therapist, but to be honest, the secret was is I wasn't buying in. I was not really taking
Yeah,
therapy seriously at all. And then when I went to college, I did try this one and it just wasn't a fit. And so I really did struggle until I got home because I didn't really know who to talk to. Because if you don't find a
yeah,
therapist or a counselor that you connect with, it's really hard to open up and to
yeah,
actually share like your whole story if you're not comfortable with them.
yeah. So being in a space where you're not able to express your true feelings and stuff like that, um, and you're now looking towards heading, you graduated, and the next stage that they tell us that we ought to be going is we need to find a job because you have to get that job, that husband, the white picket fence, the dogs, the 2.3 children or whatever it is, and all that. So the progression of the program as you're moving towards that and living on and through the default program and seeing all of this unstableness in your life and darkness. um, what were some of the conversations, Carolyn, you were having with yourself when there was no one there?
You know, I always say that no one was there, but my family was there more than I utilized.
Yeah.
I really didn't talk to my mom or dad, even my sister at one point about it because I didn't want them to worry. I didn't really want them to I didn't want them to blame themselves. I didn't want them to just like
Yeah.
have anxiety over it. So I did keep to myself a lot and, really internal battles of just kind of hating myself and just being like, why are we like this? And why do you never fit in? And why do people not like you? And why is it the same story over and over again? And really kind of self-deprecating
Yeah.
conversations to myself. That was a big thing for sure
Yeah.
that I did really struggle with.
And that's one, I always tell people we have to be very careful what you say to yourself, you'll believe it. Because, one of the things that I tell people, they said, how come you always talk to yourself? I'm like, because I understand me. I'm learning a little more about him,
Yeah.
and I want to get to know every birthday, Carolyn. I used to take myself out and have these deep conversations with myself. I'd sit there, take myself to the best restaurant that I wanted to go to, and I will question myself. How was your year? How do you feel? Why did are you where you thought you ought to be? And all these deep questions that I have with myself while I'm having the meal. And I still do it. And I think for me, it's always been an awesome time. So here you are, you're moving through life as we are talking. Um, where did you end up from school, and why did you head into that arena, if you will?
So it's funny because my senior year of college, well, I actually went to school. I got a bachelor's in marketing, but I got in a life-threatening car accident back in March 15th of 2020. And
Wow.
that was kind of the
How old were
first
you
time.
when that happened?
22. Yeah.
22.
Yeah. And that was kind of the first time that I realized that like my life was really valuable and like worth living. And in 2020, I actually was doing a little bit better, but I
Hmm.
still wasn't doing great until after the car accident. After the car accident, I had this whole new appreciation for life. I had this whole new just appreciation, gratitude. Just I looked at life so differently. And I was, lucky to be alive. I could have gone flying through that windshield. I still have nightmares about it, like I could have died. And the fact that I didn't, I truly think for me, like as a Christian, I think it was God giving me my second chance at my life. And I wasn't going to take that lightly because I just had this like whole new feeling of like, I'm alive. Like, how am I alive? Like, there's no way, like, you grabbed your seatbelt seconds before the car accident and yet you didn't die. Like, the car was
Yeah.
totaled. The car looks like everyone died. And just to
Yeah.
have that appreciation, it, it just changed my whole life. It changed just the way that I view everything. And, after the car accident, I was recovering on the couch when I realized that I had almost faced death not once but twice, once by choice and once just praying that I'd make it out of there alive. And once I knew that
Yeah.
wasn't a coincidence, that's kind of when everything started.
So once you saw that, and we call that revelation came in, if you will, as to your value, um, and you began to understand that, wait a minute, I am valuable. I am worth something. There's a price tag that is very priceless with me.
Yes.
Once you got that revelation and you began to look at your life, because you just got the revelation, that's all happened. You still got to live now. How did you begin to get up? What mindset, Carolyn, did you begin to implement and make changes in order to reflect this new value or this new revelation that you got about the fact that you're worth something?
I think it all started too with just, the mindset of like, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm happy to be alive. And I kind of just was after that, I realized that life was such a gift. And I struggled with depression, anxiety, and silently struggling for so many years. And I kind of realized, I was like, this is my time to use my voice. I'm doing actually really well right now.
Yeah.
I feel great about my life. I'm so happy to be alive. Yes, I'm doing physical therapy. Yes, I'm still going through all these, pains and everything, but, I'm here. And that was kind of when I
Yeah.
realized I wanted to use my voice and I wanted to make a difference and help other people.
And how would you use the voice when, what was your, in your mind, your perception, your understanding of using your voice? What did that look like to you?
For me, it really kind of looked like just being open and vulnerable. And, for so much of my life, I hid a huge part of me and who I was. And I think that just having that vulnerability, having that conversation, being able to talk about mental health, realizing there was such a stigma around mental health, especially at the beginning of COVID, and realizing that I was doing so well, I was like, this is almost my chance to give back to all the people who might be where I was. And
Hmm.
that's kind of when writing just became everything to me.
Yeah. And as you began to express yourself through the writings, where you're getting an opportunity to speak your truth, release what had been sitting in you for a while, um, what began to happen to Carolyn? Because now she is being able to, for lack of not a pretty term, to vomit up all of that data that she had stored inside of her, and now she's going to put that information whereby people can have access to it. How did that begin to make you feel?
You know, I realized that writing was so therapeutic for me. I realized that it was a very healing thing for me. And that's kind of when I just kept writing and turned it into a book because
Yeah.
I wanted to give someone something that I wish I would have had when I was struggling. And that's kind of how it all kind of
Mhm.
came to be, as I realized I was like, I want to kind of use my voice, share my story, because if this can even help one person, then that's what I want to do. And that's really kind of
Yeah.
where it went with that.
Is that when Unbreakable was given birth? And
Yes.
how did you come up with the title Unbreakable? Where did that come from?
Yes. So, what's crazy is before I knew the book was finished, I already knew it was going to be Unbreakable. And
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with my parents, and it was I think it was like a month or two after the car accident. And I said to them, I was like, how, like, am I, like, because I just had this whole new, like, how am I really should have gone through the windshield. Like, I can't believe I'm here. And I said to my dad, I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm just unbreakable. And I was like, wait, Dad, that's it. Unbreakable. That's what we're going to call it. And my dad's like, you are unbreakable. And I was like, that's it. That's it. So I knew pretty early on what I was going to call it. So it was special to have the title that quickly into it.
Yeah, I always ask where the title comes from because there's always a backstory
Yes.
to that title that someone has on the cover. Um,
Yes.
as a Christian, I am sure that your relationship with God also changed. Your communication, your spiritual life became much more valuable. As we said, front and center versus where we had it. Because I grew up in a church, we had it on the shelf. I'm a Christian. I know Jesus, and then things happen, and then it becomes
Yeah.
front and center in our life. How was that moving, if you will, from the shelf to front and center? What did it do to you as an individual?
It changed my life. It really kind of helped me find. I always tell people, I'm like, you just have to find something to have faith in, whether it's God or whether,
Yeah.
because I never, I tell people what I believe, but I'm like, you find what it is for you. But I truly do think that, having that relationship with God for me, having that faith, being able to pray, being able to have hope in something and to have faith in something that you can't see, but something that you believe, that changed things for me too, because I was like, you know what? There's a reason, there's a purpose for all this happening. And, there was a point in my life, and I even wrote it in my book, where I said that I wasn't Christian anymore. And I said, I was like, I screw this, whatever. If God was real, I would not be self harming. If God was real, none of these things would have happened, like all this stuff. And it literally took just a day where I was like, if there's a God, please just help me find my way, some sort of way, whether it's, therapy or friend or just like a helping hand, like someone give an olive branch kind of. And, really just changed my way of viewing life. And having that faith in God too is also kind of how I think I survived that accident, because it wasn't a coincidence. Definitely not.
No such thing. There's no such thing as
No.
everything has a season and a purpose. And I believe that I remember when I told God that I was going to be the baddest sinner he ever saw. I'm sure he laughed at me and thought, "There's this crazy guy." So here you are. You've written the book on Breakable. We talked about where you got the title from, and I think that those are inspirational things. Those little times that those things come out. So and let me address the audience for a little while. You guys know how I feel about books, because I've always loved books. I've written books myself, and I love reading books. Uh, the words in the pages are alive. Only those that are expecting change from their life will see that life. If you're reading a book just to check a box, your expectation is not alert, it's not aware, it's not there. But if you're reading a book and you're expecting something, you're excited about it or whatever, you'd be amazed how those words will become an individual that is there to greet you and to assist you from moving through from one space to another. It changed my life. I was suffering from anger and all that stuff, and I read about the cost of what anger would do to the individual and family. Never really thought about it, and others outside of me. And when I saw that, I closed the book. I never even finished the book, but I know that it changed my life forever. And even to the point where my children looked at me and said, "Dad, you have changed." That is the ultimate reward. So here you are. You're an author. You put that piece together. Talk to us now, because I know how God works. He's going to begin to stretch you, if you will. And when people began to make requirements or demands on you to tell your story, how did you transition to that? Because before, this girl was not one that would be able to tell her story. How did you begin to surrender to the fact that you are now able to tell your story, and what did it look like?
There was one day I kind of went on YouTube and I just was wondering, and I saw this thing. It says signs you have been chosen by God. And the first thing
Yeah.
was survived a horrific trauma or whatever. And I just remember being like, okay, this is me. Like you've chosen me. Why? Like what? Like come on. But I think I kind of realized that being chosen by God is being someone who is sharing his message, sharing his word through your actions, through how you treat others. And I truly think that like my purpose in life is to use my voice. I think the trauma, I think the tribulations, I think everything I've gone through is to help someone else. And I don't know everyone's purpose, but I know mine. And I think that like everyone does have a purpose. It's just like you have to like find it, and you will find it even like when you don't expect to. Because I just remember like seeing that, and then the things were, the Bible verses and just everything. And I just was like, wow, like this is me. Like this is to a T. So, and once I realized I was chosen, I was like, well, I mean, you can't choose who gets picked, but if you're chosen, you got to do everything you can to help people and serve and be a servant of God. I mean, that's just kind of what you're supposed to do as a Christian in general. But to have that actual moment where you're like, God, I know you've chosen me, it's a very interesting feeling because not everyone feels that. But to have it, it's like almost
Yeah.
like a comfort. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely know exactly what you mean. One of the things that I keep telling people, and I'll say that over and over on this podcast, we came here with an assignment. We did not come here to do a job. A job is not going to make you happy. It'll keep you and pay the bills. But when you find your assignment, it will make you happy. You'll find your happiness. You'll find joy. It'll make you purposeful. A job will not make you as purposeful as your assignment. Um, Everyone has an assignment. Jesus Christ had his assignment. He actually, the Bible tells us, he went into the Holy Spirit, took him into the wilderness, bring him out. He walks into the synagogue. He goes and he picks up the Torah and he turns to Isaiah 61 and he begins to announce what his assignment was. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to heal the sick and to all of these things. He begins to lay it out. And then he began to proceed to do what that assignment was about. The next thing we read about him was that he's healing the sick over here, he's casting out demons over there. So you and I, all of us, have an assignment. And the journey, I believe, is designed to unearth your assignment, to make you aware of it. Jesus' journey, he had to go in through the wilderness to get tempted for several days, and then he came out. And through his um, temptation or his journey in that wilderness, he came out knowing what his assignment was, and he began to announce it and began to do it. Hey, you and I are no different. So we got to do the same thing. And once you've learned to surrender to it, your assignment or your gift will begin to use you. And that's what began to happen in Carolyn's life, is that her gifts begins to use her, where she begins to move back and forth as a result of being obedient to the call or the assignment that she has for her life. And so you guys, I know you guys have been patient listening to us, and she does many other things. I'm going to give you guys all of the stuff on her site so that you can go and talk to her or get in her space. Those of you that are engaged in the mindset, the thought, the belief of depression and anxiety and stuff like that, I have someone that has gone through it. I have someone who has gone through some near-death experience several times. I know someone that has been uh, contemplating suicide. We're talking to Carolyn. All of you that have these type mind thoughts, get in touch with her. We're going to provide everything for you guys to get in touch with her. There is help. You are not alone. You are worth everything. You are so expensive, man. You're priceless. You're one of a kind. I keep telling people, Carolyn, that there's industries that are on this planet based on our uniqueness. When you die, you are gone. There's no one else like you. They have voice recognition, face recognition, fingerprinting. All these industries are based on our uniqueness. You are one of a kind, precious stuff. Don't allow anyone to abuse you or tell you that you're not worth it. So here you are, Carolyn. You have a young woman. You've been through much. You're expanding from you're an author. What is it that you feel within your being right now? Because I tell people, I've been asking this question lately. because I sense that we are about to have some changes on the planet. What is it that you're sensing within your being, and where do you think God is pulling you to that next adventure, if you will, as He's leading you in your life?
You know, being an author is wonderful and I love that, but I also really find a joy of something that I found as well is public speaking. Speaking to kids, speaking to young adults, really kind of just trying to give them hope. I just want to continue speaking and, sharing my story and hope that it can help people. I think that's kind of my main thing now is just trying to get to as many schools and colleges or organizations, really whoever, because if you go to my website actually and you say like, get in touch with me, you can connect with me, you can send me, things about where you want to book, if you want me to be, a speaker, and I get in touch with you and we pick a date, and it's a really cool thing, and it really doesn't feel like work. It kind of just feels like I'm just living out my purpose every day, and I truly truly find such a joy after speaking and having a kid come up to you and being like, thank you, that really helped me, or like, I'm going through this thing right now and that like really kind of gave me hope. And those type of things, it's so priceless because no other job would make me that happy. It's part of my assignment.
Yeah. Yeah. The assignment is designed to give you the joy and the happiness. The job is help you to survive. And most people
Yes.
are surviving, and they have agreed to survive. And, but those that are seeking help, we have someone. So, Carolyn, I just want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. We are going to provide all of your information because I do want people to get into your space, buy the books and give it and offer it to kids and families that are struggling with depression and anxiety and all of these different things. There's lots of wisdom going to be in there, and insight, understanding, information, data that can assist that individual through their pain. So purchase the books, give it to people, and maybe you read it as self and see, so that you'll be able to have a conversation with someone if you see them exhibiting depression and anxiety. You'll be able to assist them. So, Carolyn, I want to thank you again for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.